Hey everybody, welcome back to Santa's Workshop. Santachris here. So I have heard a lot of people talk about drawing and can't figure this out and can't figure that out. And so I wanted to do something a little very basic. I want to kind of talk a little bit about X, Y, and Z axis and planes as far as considering drawing and how to do that. So basically, we start at a basic level so that you get a general understanding of how to set up a drawing. I know we've got AI, and I know that we've got all these wonderful softwares now, Xtool and these other companies that are coming out with all this information that you can use up front, which is great. Don't get me wrong, I can take and use a lot of that as well, but sometimes it's just best that you can draw. Now, if you remember back in the old days, you used to draw two squares and put lines with it and made a three-dimensional object. So we're going to talk about that just a little bit, that concept and how to use that when you want to try something. So if that interests you, stay tuned and I'll show you what I'm talking about.
Snow chains on the reindeer, chrome shine on the sleigh, red suit smelling like sawdust, he's been grinding all day. North Pole shop lights buzzing, elves lined up in a row, safety goggles and coffee, watching that red beam glow. Sleigh bells and laser beams, hey! Santa's burning up your dreams, from candy canes to steel keychains. He's etching every name it says. Sleigh bells and laser beams.
So the first part of this video, basically what I want to do is I want to reiterate X, Y, and Z. Now, if you have a 3D printer, laser, CNC, any of that, you have a basic concept of it. But I want you to start thinking of it from the object of whatever you're wanting to do, whatever kind of design you're wanting to do, or whatever kind of object that you're going to copy. That's where you need to figure it out from as well. So we're going to switch over. I've got a piece of wood over here in my lathe just to give a demonstration, and let me show you what I'm talking about. So here you can see the piece of wood I've set inside the laser bed. And the reason I did that was to demonstrate something right quick with the wood and also the laser. Now, most of us know that if you go this way across your laser, that's the X axis. If you go that way, that's going to be your Y axis. And then if the table comes up and down, that's going to be your Z axis. So how does that correlate to what we're looking at with the piece of wood? Well, here's your X axis, right? Here's your Y axis, and then your Z axis is down or up, depending on where you're looking at it. So that's the concept we want to start with, because in Lightburn, you're drawing two-dimensional drawings. And so that's where we're going to start at, is in Lightburn. So right before we get into Lightburn, you may have noticed that I had wrote on the block itself. And I'm going to tell you, this may be one way for you to understand and help if you're at home to do this. So what we did is I wrote on the top. So 90% of the time when you're looking at something, you're either looking at it from a front view or a top view to begin with, okay? So if you're looking at it from the top view, the bottom is, of course, here on the back side. That would leave the front and then the back. And then if you're looking at it that way, you're going to have a right and a left. That's very important to understand, because you can take a simple 2D drawing, draw these different views, and end up getting what you need. Now, like I said, this is an X axis. This would be a Y axis. If you're using the front as the face that you're using, this is your X axis. This is your Y axis. Now, what if we're looking at it this way? Now we've got two different sides that we can see, and this is called an isometric view, which sometimes is turned like that so that you can see all three sides. So those are the different ways that you can do this. So now we'll get into Lightburn, like I was said a minute ago, and we'll talk about each one of these. Oh, hey, forgot to say it up front. If you would, like and subscribe if you enjoy this. It's a lot of information, and it's going to be interesting, I hope. So if you would, please do that for me. I'd appreciate it. So here we are in Lightburn, and one of the first things I want you to notice right here is most of these software, and I would probably say all software, they show where your x-axis and your y-axis is. Now, as I said a minute ago, we're going to use the front view because that is where you usually start at. This across here would be your x. This right here is going to be your y. So if I remember that, I know this is going to be 5 inches across, and I know this is going to be 1 inch tall. So if I want to draw it in Lightburn, if I can get the software to work, there we go. Then we're going to draw out a rectangle. And like I said, I know that it's going to be 5 inches long and it's 1 inch wide. So now I have drawn that front face for whatever object. And that's how you start a drawing. Very basic, very general 2D drawing. Now I've got these up here just to show you another thing. You start out with your front view, okay? Then above it and below it is naturally your top and your bottom. Then you have your back. Then you would have a left and a right. Now, laying all this out has an advantage because you can look at it from every angle. You can take that block and look at it and compare it and make as many changes as you want. And I have demonstrated that by doing this. These two circles represent a hole that has been drilled in one side, comes out the other. And these two lines that are here represent going through that piece. Now, normally, if it's embedded inside, these two lines here would be a dashed line saying that they're hidden within the wood, okay? So basically, every one of these lines inside here that you see in all four sections here would be hidden lines to represent that hole. Now, on the ends, they would be open because you could look at it directly and see that the hole was there. So that's kind of how you set this up. Now, the one thing I haven't told you yet is I said we'd talk about planes as well. Each one of these is a plane, and that comes into effect when you start talking about 3D. So not only do you have an x-axis and a y-axis, you have, this is the back plane. This over here would be the front plane. And that's going to come up here in just a few minutes when we get into the other software. So let's switch over and we'll look at some of that. So here we are, we're going to start with Tinkercad, which a lot of you guys have used at probably some point or another, at least tried. So we're going to go into Create, and we're going to 3D Design. And you'll notice this says a work plane. So we now know that we are in one of the planes. We're going to take a simple box, and we're going to set it down right here. And what you want to do is I want to make this a 1 inch by 1 inch by 5 inch long object within Tinkercad. So right now it's 1 by 1 by 1. And so what do I want to change? I want to change this width. So I want it to be 5. It's as simple as that. Whoop. So let you do that. So there. So now I have a piece that's 1 by 1 by 5. And what are we looking at? We're looking at two different sides. So we're looking at the front view and we're also looking at the top view. So that is how you start in Tinkercad, is get those first two. Now, if I do a look over here, it tells you exactly, I want the top view. There it went. Now I want to go back down here. There's the front view. This is how you rotate in all the different kinds of 3D software. Want to look for this box. Now, if I wanted to look at the corner of the front and the right side, I would take and turn it like that. And if you remember earlier, I turned the block like that so we could see that as well. So it's very simple, it's very basic, but I want you to start understanding what you're drawing. So now, if I'm looking at this from the top view, this is like looking at it in the laser a little while ago. We're looking at the block that goes this way and then goes up for the Y. So next we'll try Fusion. We are in Fusion, and I will tell you up front, this is a very powerful software It was basically created to start doing metal work with a lot of CNC programming and things like that. You can basically create something in here, get it to generate a code, G code, and then it would be sent to the actual machine. And I'll show you this right here kind of reiterates what I'm talking about. In Fusion, when you have the full version, which I don't have because I'm using it just for drawing small stuff for the side hustle, but you can do a 2D view. You can do a 3D view of a part, an individual part. You can also take that individual part and you can assemble it into other assemblies and make an entire product out of that. So this has a lot of functionality. Now, when you get this free version, you can't do the drawing part. They've grayed that out, so you can't actually do it or the electronics down here. But we can do a part design. So we're going to go into Fusion here, and we're going to create this box again. Now, the first thing I want to look for when I come in here is where's my little box tells me what view I'm looking at. There's my front view. There's my right view, and there's my top view. Now, one other thing I want you to notice is if you see this little red X here, it corresponds with this red line here, which is our X axis. The one thing you can't see right now because it's hidden behind the box is the Y axis, which is green, and it's represented by that green line right there. And then, of course, the Z is going straight up. So if you imagine there in the center, you're going straight up in the Z axis. So which face do I want to start with? Well, I said a little while ago, you probably wanted to at least start with your front. So what I want to do is I want to move it into the front axis. Okay. Now you can see, now I'm drawing it only as a 2D view, but I'm going to add one feature to it. This plane. And I want to start here and I want it to go 1 inch high. And I want that to be 1 inch high. And I want the length to be 5 inches long. So now I have drawn a 1 by 1 by 5, but all you can see is the face. So if I go back up here and I go back to the home view, there is my box with the face, with the top, and with the right side. And that is how you start creating within Fusion. Now, the other thing I want to show you is we'll go out and we'll come back in again because one thing I want to show you in addition to that, you can go just to the individual plane or you can come back in here under new, go back into part, create new. And when you hit the box, if you don't actually set your plane here, when you create your box, it shows you the 3 planes. These yellow boxes are the planes that you potentially want to look. Well, we want to go to the face. Okay. Well, that says the planner or face. So I want to make sure I do the front. And so I do that. And then it will take and draw another box from, I want that one 1 inch high. I want this one 5 inches long. Oh. So I'm 5 inches long, 1 inch high, 1 inch high. Okay. Now I am looking at that in an isometric view. I can see the front, I can see the right-hand side, and I can see the top. Now, if I want to just look at the front view, all I've got to do is turn it and return back to the original view. So that is how you do a starter drawing within Fusion. Pretty much the same as you saw in Tinkercad. Now, one final one we're going to look at is we'll look at Freecad, and it's basically the same thing, but I want to demonstrate that one as well. All right, so here, final 3D we're going to talk about will be Freecad today. And as you can see, it has basically the same functions that Fusion had a while ago. You can draw in a 2D direction, then you can make a what they call a parametric part, which is an individual piece. And then you can take those pieces and you can assemble them and make an entire assembly to make whatever product. So you have those options. Now, in the 2D version, we'll come in. And so what axis are we in? When we look over here, we're looking from the top. We're looking at the top down. You can see that the y-axis goes up. If you look right here, the green, here's your green for your y-axis. Your x-axis is the red line. So I want to draw my little rectangle, and we're going to start over here. And what you want to do in Freecad, and it took me a time or two to figure this one out, you want to pull it over there and then just let your mouse go. Because if you look over here on this left-hand side, you can actually physically enter that information. If you don't, what happens is you try to enter the information and you either have it going the wrong direction or something like that. So if I'm looking at the top view, I know that my length across the x-axis has to be 5 inches, right? So now in my y, how high does it need to be? Well, that block, if I'm looking at it from the top, is only 1 inch wide across the top. So you got 1 inch wide. And this being a 2D drawing, we're going to have a 0. We're going and see, that's exactly what I was talking about. We'll do it again here. So we're going to have 5 inches, 1 inches, and go ahead and enter your 0 and then hit enter. So that represents a 5-inch box with a 1-inch box from the top. And the thing is even if you rotate this, because we're in a 2D drawing, you don't see any change because that's the way this works. It's simply 2 dimensions, X and Y. So now we're going to come out of that and we're going to explore. We're going to go back in here this time with the parametric part. So now we have our little box, and you'll notice we're not looking at the top, we're looking at the corner again. And right here is our X and our Y and our Z. And we do the same thing we did before. An additive box, it shows the additive. So my length is going to be 5. My width is going to be 1. And my height is going to be 1. So now I have created that same box. We have the front view. It's 5 inches long. We have the top view and we have the side view. And that's it. Now there's a lot of other things that we'll talk about in just a minute. So we've been basically talking about a rectangular shape. And so that's a simple way to start. And what I wanted to go ahead and tell you about right quick was the fact that as you get further along, you're going to find things. If you draw a circle, one face, it may be round, but if you look at it from a different direction, it may be oval. If you've done any laser engraving of tumblers and stuff like that, you know, if you have a round shape, sometimes you have to elongate it in order for it to come in correct, and it's those kind of things. But that's not what this video is about. It's basically to show you the different planes, to show you the different X, Y, and Z values, and to get you thinking in that terms of each individual piece of that front, back, side, left, right, so that you understand when you start drawing. Now, I will show you one other thing. What if I am in 2D, but I want to show some depth? Now, we have all done this, and I'll show you what I mean here in a minute. We were all kids at one time, and we learned how to draw this, but this is how you would add depth. So we're going to go back into Lightburn, and I will show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to show you is how to show some depth in a 2D object. Now, there's a ton of different ways to do this as well, but we're going to keep with the small piece of wood. And this time, I'm going to do it as a square. So I'm going to draw a box in here, and I'm going to make it about 3 inches by 3 inches. And I'm going to assume that this is my right-hand side. I'm going to take and I'm going to duplicate that. And at this point, you're probably going to go, oh, yes, I remember doing this back when I was in school. So now we have 2 boxes, and we're going to go from that point to that point. We're going to draw another line from there to that point, in there to there. So now we have basically a 3D object, but we can't represent a 3D object within a 2D drawing. So what are we actually looking at? If you will take your block and you will look at it in the same orientation, what you will find is you will only see this face up here or this plane. You'll see this plane and this plane, which means these lines here and this back here right now are hidden, or as we were talking about earlier, they would be dashed. This line would also be dashed, which I didn't draw for purposes of clarity. So now what I want to do is I want to go in here and I want to trim out. Let me get the center one first. I want to trim that out so that I now have this box. I have actually created some depth within my 2D model that I can take and use for whatever purpose I need to. So this is another way in order to draw and show what that you're trying to represent in your product. So if you've made it here to the end, I very much appreciate it. I know this was a lot of information and a lot of it was redundant as far as the way everything was done in the different softwares, but I wanted to show how it's done in each one only because it is redundant, and you can, if you go from one to another, you can quickly understand how that works. Now, the one thing I will tell you is if you still don't understand quite, get you a piece of wood, do exactly what I've done here. Write all the top, sides, bottoms on it. Even if you want to, take and look at it from the front. Take and run the front and put X axis and put Y axis and put Z axis on it. And start manipulating that in your hand physically while you're sitting there working on your design. It'll help you a lot. And I think that if you keep doing that, between that and you getting the stuff off Etsy and everywhere else, you'll be way ahead of a lot of other people. And that was the reason I wanted to do this, was because I see so many people complaining about it. So thank you for watching and hope to see you on the next one.
Snow chains on the reindeer, chrome shine on the sleigh, red suit smelling like sawdust, he's been grinding all day. North Pole shop lights buzzing, elves lined up in a row, safety goggles and coffee, watching that red beam glow. Sleigh bells and laser beams, Santa's burning up your dreams. From candy canes to steel keychains, he's etching every name it says. Sleigh bells and laser beams.